Alright guys, I've been talking a little bit on my social media about volcano mulch. And it's something that happens quite a bit over time with trees. But I wanted to bring in the big guns, which is Chris Francis, who's an arborist, to tell you guys really why you shouldn't be doing the mulch volcanoes, how to do it properly. I don't know, just tell us all the things, Chris.
So we see it all the time, and some are worse than others, but ultimately what happens is you want to expose the trunk flare. And so that trunk flare is defined as the area where the trunk transitions into roots. And so
does that little swoop, that little curve, right?
So if you think about a really old tree, it's not a telephone pole going down to the ground. It's this really artistic, muscular, roots kind of coming out where they connect into the trunk, and that's what we want to see. And there's a number of reasons.
Why do we need to see that? Why do we need to see that?
So the main reason is that it prevents roots from growing around it. Roots aren't going to jump out of the ground and just wrap around the trunk. Okay, so roots will grow where soil is. So if you have soil or mulch even piled on top of the trunk, then roots are going to grow there.
Because mulch eventually breaks down and turns into soil.
Right, which is the beauty of mulch, that it breaks down, it's organic matter, it really fixes that soil, it really helps in a lot of ways, but not right against the trunk, not right at that trunk flare. And so we don't want that to break down in the soil, we don't want roots to grow right around the base of the tree. But what will happen is those roots will actually strangle the trunk of the tree. Okay. So they're not grafting to it. Roots can graft with other roots.
I thought it had to do with suffocation of roots.
It does as well.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. So the trunk is designed to be in the air. And so that's a big part of it. The trunk's designed to be in the air, roots are designed to be in the ground. Mm-hmm. The trunk, when it's covered up by soil, then it really creates some problems. It can't let gas out. It can't get air in.
Remember, trees are living, breathing things.
Yeah, the trees create oxygen, but then their roots need oxygen. That oxygen needs to get down to them. But we need air to get to the trunk. We don't want soil built up onto the trunk, especially because that soil will stay wet and maintains some level of moisture, humidity. And then we're holding that up against the trunk, and it creates some fungal problems. So it's just all these problems. Yeah. So we think of like all the issues that can happen by having that soil on the trunk and the trunk flare, and there's really no advantage to having the mulch there. There's a lot of disadvantages, but there's no advantages to having it there.
I think maybe people think it looks pretty, or really, I think it's a lot like, now, well, this is a different subject that we can talk about a different day, but crepe murder, as we call it, where people just go through and cut their crepe myrtles at chest height. And I really believe that a lot of people do that because it's what their neighbors do.
I was going to say the same thing.
So I think that this volcanoing situation a lot of times happens because it's what they see their neighbors doing, and so they just do it too. There's a lot of activity of rescue people happening right now. So if that's our problem, and you're not supposed to do that, and all the reasons you're not supposed to do that, what is the solution? I have been telling the followers on social media that you can mulch around your trees, but just make sure that every season you're actually pulling it out and then putting new in. But there's probably an even better.
So you can do that, but the mulch will break down, and so I'm fine with that as long as you're not using old rubber tires or something like that.
It doesn't break down.
Then any mulch you use, whether it's leaves or wood chips or bark or pine straw, whatever it is, it's going to break down. It's going to form organic matter, and it's basically going to make really good soil.
Well, let me ask you this question too. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
Yeah, no, you're good.
What do you think the reason is? Was there some historical reason why people would think that they want to mulch around their trees? Because I think we do it underneath landscape beds and stuff to keep weeds and stuff, but trees don't usually grow weeds as much underneath them like a flower bed would. So I wonder what the original context for even wanting to put mulch around your tree to start with.
I don't know.
Like, did people think that breaking down that organic matter would help the tree? Like, maybe there was always a misunderstanding. I've stumped you.
I don't know. I think what happens is it starts with a little, and then instead of spreading it out or removing it, then they just add more and more and more, and they just keep adding it.
So if there is a volcano situation, and we're looking at one right now that's basically exactly what you were talking about, where they've kept building it over time and it keeps breaking down. So now at this point it's like this tiny little thin layer of mulch with a ton of soil underneath it that's going to kill this tree eventually. is there something that you can do to fix that? Is there a method to fix it?
So
can you undo all the wrongs?
Hopefully. Now, ultimately it depends on what's underneath there. So there are times when we will attack that mulch volcano and then find really very little of anything down there. We pull the mulch back and the tree's good, and we just leave it alone. Other times we barely start that excavation process and we find roots that are wrapping around the trunk, roots that are so large that if you cut them, then it would kill the tree. If you leave them there, it's going to kill the tree. So it's, you know, really have to get the client involved and say, hey, you know, here's what's going on. Maybe we got to just kind of let this tree live out and then maybe plant another tree. So a lot of that's, you know, it's not fixable. It's not reversible once it's gone beyond a certain part. So what we'd want to do is remove the mulch, and that sounds easier, you know, than what it really is. So you can use your hands, especially with some gloves. You can get a little more traction. You don't want to use a shovel because you're going to damage the tree. You're going to damage the roots. You don't know where they are. We can assume, okay, well, maybe they're 6 inches down, and you hit down and whoop, hit one. And now you've caused permanent damage. You don't want to use a machine like a, you know, excavator or skid steer or something like that. We could use water. Water tends to make a mess, so it can be done, but it can't. And you don't want to use a pressure washer where you're blasting the bark off of the tree. So it can be done, but you have to be very careful. The method that we prefer is to use air. It's pneumatic.
I've seen you guys with the huge, like, blowing, like, really high pressure air.
Well, so it's low pressure. It's and I want to specify that
high pressure.
It's high volume. It's high volume. Yeah. So it's only about 100 to 150 psi. So about what you're using to air up your car tire or something like that. But it's high volume. So instead of getting maybe 8 gallons per minute out of that, we're getting like 385 gallons.
Wow.
Like it's a ton of air. And so like we've got compressors that are, you know, bigger than the back of my truck. Like you know, they're monsters. And so that's the whole idea, is you're moving a lot of air through there very quickly. And so where the air is actually blowing the soil off, blowing the mulch off, and we call that non-invasive. Because the roots are still left intact. The trunk is still left intact. It's not damaging them.
So once you get through with that, then you can go through and clip roots if you have to and kind of see what you're working with and hopefully fix it. Right.
The simple part would be we just blow the soil and the mulch off and then we fix whatever root problems are there. A lot of times we'll actually have to start the air excavation process, then go in and cut roots because they're in the way of more mulch and more soil, and then we'll have to blow more out, and so it's this back and forth, and forth. So it can be very time consuming. With that, unfortunately, we can't really give a price per tree because we don't know what's down there. As I mentioned before, it may take just a couple minutes, or we may spend all day on one tree. And so until we get down there, we don't know. So a lot of that's either done hourly or daily where we're going in there. And it's really sad because it doesn't need to be done as long as somebody just didn't pile the soil on there initially. So
they're calling you in because things have gotten so far removed from where they should be.
Well, so our typical call for that is, okay, let me back up. We don't get calls that say, hey, we need air excavation.
They don't,
because they don't know.
Right.
So they're calling us in saying, hey, our tree's looking bad. Or they might call us to look at one tree and we say, well, your concerns over here aren't really that big of a deal, but this
other tree is an emergency.
A bigger deal. You're right. And so we're educating the clients, and then we're showing them, you know, what it's supposed to be like, and talking to them about that. And then, so very few calls, they're looking for that service. So it's not that we're trying to sell them something, it's just that that's something that's really necessary. And
well, I mean, we're in Mobile, and if you're, a lot of my social media audience is in Mobile, and even if you're not in Mobile, we love our oak trees, our live oak trees, and I'm sure that's probably a very large portion of your tree saving.
Right, those are trees that people are willing to spend money on.
Yeah, right.
There's a lot of trees, people say, oh, it's going to cost X amount of dollars to help it. Well, we'll just remove it.
Right.
And, you know.
But if it's a live oak, there's just another feeling in your heart about it.
You're right. Yeah, people spend extra time and money on the live oaks.
Well, it's taken them so many years to get as big as they are, and you hate to just have to cut them down. Okay, so would you be able to show us a little bit something that someone can do from home that they can start the process? All right, so Chris is going to show us how to pull that volcano away at home. First step before you need to call him, try to maybe do a little bit of repair yourself. All right, you ready to show us what to do?
Sure.
Step number 1.
So we're going to take like some little trowels or some gloves and just pull the stuff back from the tree, a little bit at a time. Don't get super aggressive. It's a patient man's game. So
seems like good therapy.
So right here we've exposed some small roots. At this point they're not considered girdling, they're circling. So what will happen is these roots will continue to increase in diameter. The trunk will continue to increase in diameter.
Right.
And they will
get tighter and tighter.
Get tighter, right? And they will strangle. These will become girdling roots. So I like to use the old tools for this, not your good ones.
Yeah.
And then
you're gonna get down in the dirt.
Yeah, you're getting down in the dirt. You're gonna ruin them. Yeah. So what we want to do is we can come in here and basically just cut, and then find the other end, and we can cut that.
Oh.
Same thing in here. We just want to get all these off of here.
You're gonna be free, tree.
We're helping you out.
Chris is here to help you.
And so what we want to do, we don't want to just do that one little spot. We want to do that all the way around. But in the interest of time, then we'll just do that little section there. But we want to keep going down, and we want to see where the trunk flares out and turns into roots.
Remember, it's got that scoop, right?
Yep.
So the very last thing is to smooth this out over so that we're actually covering the roots, because you do want to cover the roots.
Yeah, the buttress roots, and again, for the root's sake, you don't have to cover them. But in urban environments, I typically do, because they're subjected to the lawnmowers and the string trimmers. And
a layer of dirt is better over them than lawnmowers and trimmers and baby strollers, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So if you have a volcano mulch situation at your house, first thing to do is to do those 3 simple steps we just talked about, and then if you can't figure it out or your tree is already on its way out, call Chris and he'll help you out.